In 2016, Olympic decathlon winner Bruce Jenner jumped a different kind of hurdle, transitioning to Caitlyn Jenner. It was a notable milestone, increasing the visibility and acceptance of transgender individuals. They are television and social media stars.
I have a girl brain, but a boy body. This is called transgender. I was born this way.
They are activists, politicians, athletes. They are entertainers and artists and models and beauty pageant contestants. But in some parts of the world, it is still a crime to be transgender, and in many places, trans people face discrimination in employment, services, housing, and healthcare. Danger is widespread, death far from unknown. In the US, for instance, there's been an alarming uptick in murders of transgender women of color. Because of fear and stigma, there are no reliable figures on the number of transgender women and men. But in many parts of the world, transgender voices are growing louder. They want to be heard, they want to be seen, and seen as they truly are.
Are you saying that you're going to start dressing up like a lady all the time?
No, honey, all my life, my whole life, I've been dressing up like a man. This is me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former mayor of New Hope, Texas, and human rights advocate, Jess Herbst.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. It is quite an honor to get to speak in front of you today. I have the task today of hoping to explain a little bit about what it's like to grow up as a transgender person. And for me, growing up from the 1960s. What you see is me at 3 years old. People ask me, when did you know? When did you become transgender? The answer is, I never became transgender. I always was. That little boy that you see there knew that she was a girl. I had the honor of growing up in a family with 2 older brothers. As you can see from an early picture, my oldest brother with his basketball, my other brother with his top, and I had my doll. My friends in the neighborhood were the girls up the street, Diana, Leslie, and Barbara, and I had a great time. We played, and I just had the most wonderful time. We played dolls, we played dress up. The problem was I came home, and my mother had this beautiful dress. This is not actually it, but it's as close as I can find, a 60s gold paisley dress. And I would go to my mother's closet, take it, and walk around the house, and this absolutely drove my parents crazy. This was 1962. There was no such thing in the literature about transgender. The word hadn't even been invented yet. The only role models we had at that time that you could look at were Norman Bates, a killer. They were soon replaced by the guy in Silence of the Lambs that was making a girl suit. It was not the best. So my parents said, that's it, you have to stop playing with the girls of the street. I was fortunate that I had a Japanese-American family just moved in next door, and I thought they were amazing. I thought their house was fascinating. They taught me origami, and I also learned that their mother made the most amazing lasagna. It took me a while to realize that lasagna was not a Japanese dish. So I went on through my early childhood, and as the video said, pretending to be a boy. What else could I do? And I did pretty well with it. I enjoyed my friends. But then, my father even cemented it by naming our boat My Three Sons, just to make sure I knew that where my place was. If y'all don't know, that was a very popular TV show in the 60s. When I hit puberty, and all the girls around me started changing, and I realized I was changing too, but I wasn't changing in a way that I wanted to change. The boys I hung out with were catcalling and just going crazy about the girls. I was jealous. That was who I wanted to be. And so when I went home, I would sneak into my mother's closet. I would take her clothes. I would slip into them and wear them at night and then wake up early so that nobody could see me. The problem was that I was 12 years old, and when they got dirty, I just went and stole some more. I had them hidden very cleverly in my closet in a YMCA gym bag. Not the best place to hide something like that. My parents found this, and they sent me to a psychologist in Dallas, Texas. Again, this is the 1970-71 time frame. He'd never heard of transgender. He just thought that there was something wrong with my father. My father was not being manly enough, so he told my father to expose me to sports, which he did. I was taken to baseball games and football games. They enrolled me in YMCA baseball. The problem is that then, as now, I threw like a girl. I was not interested in sports whatsoever. So the next thing that happened was he was told maybe if I exercised, that would bring out the masculinity in me. And I balked at this. I had things to do. I didn't want to spend an hour a day exercising. So the psychologist told my father, we'll take a paddle and just beat him until he does them. This went on for about a year. They miscalculated because if you take somebody that's 12 years old and give them exercise an hour a day very rigorously, you develop some muscles. So one day I took the paddle from my father's hand, I snapped it over my knee, and I said, that's it, no more, and I'm not going to see the doctor again. And I went back to hiding and pretending to be a boy. They thought I was cured. And as one of my friends says, it's not a cold, you don't get over it. I also had a problem with myself. I knew who I was on the inside, but I also knew that if I was a girl, I should be attracted to men, and I had no interest whatsoever in men. So I was very confused. The point is that sexual orientation and your gender identity are two completely different things. Just like anybody in this room, you can be gay, straight, bi. Being transgender has no effect on that whatsoever. If I had known that back in 1974, things would have been different. I moved on and I went to college, East Texas State University. As you can tell, probably a very liberal place. It wasn't. But I fit in fairly well, and I've had a large crowd of friends, most of them women. That was who I was comfortable hanging out with. I had a better time talking to them. I just related to them a lot better. One of them was the girl you see here. Her name was Debbie Gray. We were very good friends, hung out together quite a lot. Then one day, the college played a movie on campus, and I went with the group of friends. Debbie sat next to me. It happened to be Rocky Horror Picture Show. Something stirred not only in me that day, because here was, well, it's still not a great role model, but at least he wasn't killing people yet. But more importantly, something stirred in Debbie as well. She recognized something was going on in me, and we went out, we talked, and I fessed up to her. I was 18 years old, and I said, look, this is who I am. And I thought that was going to be the end of our relationship. I figured she would just leave me. But no, we got married. 1980. We had a very good marriage. We still have a very good marriage. We'll be married 40 years this coming summer. Because Debbie knew who I was and what I was able to express myself at home on the weekends. I would get to dress up on the weekends, and then during the week I had to pretend to be a boy again. The exception to that is every transgender person's favorite holiday, which is Halloween. Every Halloween was great because I got to be me. And people are like, oh, you're so funny. It's like, you really don't understand. You just don't. Something else happened pretty soon. When I was 29, I had a daughter. When I was 31, I had another daughter. And I thought, wow, this is it. This has been the problem. I've had all this femininity in me all my life, but I have two daughters now, and it must have flowed to them. So I was thrilled to death to have these two daughters. And growing up, I got to express my femininity with them. I picked their clothes. I did their hair. When they got older, I helped them with their makeup. And I was very happy. I had these daughters. But the problem is, like I said earlier, it doesn't go away. It's been there since I was born. So I started feeling restless again. I was also at this point working. I had a fairly nice career early on. I worked at places like the American Museum of Natural History. I worked on Air Force bases. I worked in the Pentagon, all the time scared to death that somebody was going to figure out who I was. And it was very difficult. I was absolutely convinced that if I shaved my beard off, everyone would know. That's kind of the way your mind works when you're trans, because you feel like there's something wrong with you. And again, I didn't know what transgender was. I thought I was the only person in the world like this. And then the internet came about. And once the internet shows up, I started looking around. The good thing about the internet is that it was a place that people who felt isolated before could get online and talk to people. I did a little searching and I came up with a site called crossdressers.com. I thought that must be what I was, because I knew I wasn't attracted to men, so I couldn't be a woman because all women must be interested in men. And I had the opportunity with this to talk to people from all over the world. We would talk about our fears of coming out. We would talk about clothing. We would talk about makeup, but we would talk about who we were. And this was good, but it wasn't that good, because all I was doing was typing on a keyboard and looking at a screen. So I just decided that there had to be some way. There had to be, if there was all these people online, there had to be some place where there was real people in the real world. And after a little searching, I found a site called Dallas Feminine Expression. It was a meetup group. And this is a group of real live actual transgender people going someplace and meeting other real live transgender people. The very first thing I went to was a thing called Chicks. Turns out there was an all-transgender band in Dallas, Texas that performed at one of the gay clubs downtown. I showed up, and there's a room with 40 transgender people in it, and I thought the whole world had changed. Now I could see people who looked like me, who acted like me, who felt like I did, and I got a chance to sit down and talk to them and hear their stories, and could see where things were the same between them. They had experienced a lot of the same things. We're all human beings. We're all different. So there's differences, but there was so much similarity that it was very comforting. I stayed with this group for quite a while, to the point where I was spending every weekend. Matter of fact, at some point I became one of the leaders of the group, organizing meetups, and to the point where anytime there was somebody new, which was 2 or 3 new people every week, I would sit down with them, introduce myself, talk to them, try to make them feel comfortable, because I've been doing this now for about a year. Still, this was the weekends. And so I was being myself on the weekends and then going back to being somebody else, pretending to be somebody else all week long. I decided there was only one thing to be done with it, and that was I needed to get out of this group, because I felt like I was just pretending. It was not real, and I wanted to be real. So I had a long talk with my wife, and she decided, and I decided, that I could transition, but I had to tell my kids, because I had not told them anything about this. So I sat my oldest daughter down, and I said, look, I need to tell you something. I said, I'm transgender. Without batting an eye, she looked at me and she said, well, that explains a lot. I told my other daughter, same thing. You know, it's not a surprise. They both sat me down and said things like, walk over there, sit down. No, that's not how you do it. They took it upon themselves, my teenage daughters, to teach me all the things that I missed not getting to grow up as the person I was. All the things, I had to learn how to act like a boy. They came to the rescue and taught me how to act like a girl. I then started hormone replacement therapy. And at this point, I knew I was transitioning. Hormone replacement therapy is a slow process, but it changes your physical appearance. And my physical appearance was starting to change. I had one little problem. I had been on our city council for about 13 years at this time, and I knew that at some point somebody was going to notice. I had been a city councilman, a road commissioner, and at this point I was currently mayor pro tem. So I made the decision to run for one more term, and when that term was over, I wasn't going to run. My term was 2 years at a time. I felt like I had at least 2 more years before it would get to the point where it was completely noticeable and people were going to start asking questions. So everything was going great. I ran for re-election. I won my reelection. The mayor at the time was also running, and he also won his seat. Unfortunately, he died 3 days before the election. Still won. I was mayor pro tem at the time. We're a tiny little town in Texas under what's called Texas general law, and so the prescribed law is that the city council would appoint a new mayor. They appointed me unanimously, and all I thought was, uh-oh. What am I going to do? I took over the role of mayor in 2016. The city was actually in a bit of trouble. The mayor had been sick for a couple of years. A lot of things had been let slide. There were issues with appointments that hadn't been made for several years. So I had a choice of either stopping transitioning, which meant I went back to pretending, which honestly was not an option. I could resign as mayor, but then I was going to leave my city in a lurch because there was so much stuff that needed to be done. So I came to the conclusion that there was only one thing to do, and that was to tell the city that I was transgender and that I was transitioning. I took about 6 months and went and talked to each city council member one by one, explaining them what I was and who I was and what was happening. I was shocked, but I got all their support. By December of 2016, everybody in the city, council, the workers, everyone knew, but the citizens did not. So I struck upon a plan. I had to figure out a way to tell 700 people that I was trans, and I didn't have a ballroom like this where I could tell them in one spot. I wrote a letter. I posted it to the town website, thinking that, okay, the city's going to read it, and maybe the town near us where there was a small newspaper, it might get picked up there. I could live with that. So here I am, I'm mayor, I tell everyone, we're good. I post the letter online. I immediately start getting emails from people in my town. I'm like, here it comes. They were all positive. They were all affirming. They were all just wonderful. They thought I was brave. They thought that, it's wonderful that I was being honest with them, and I felt really, really good. So the January 2017 meeting, the sign now says Jess Herbst. Little did I know that in the back of the council member meeting that day was a reporter from the Texas Observer. His article went live that night. It was all over the United States by 10 o'clock, and by about 10:30, it had hit the UK. I woke up the next morning, and there were 5 television trucks in my front yard. I did interviews with every local station in Dallas, Fort Worth. I thought, that's it. Okay, we got Dallas. We're great. Then the calls started coming in. This is the BBC. I did an interview on the BBC. I did another interview on the BBC. I did one on Canadian television. I did one in Australia. I did Irish radio, Spain, all over. I even have a newspaper clipping from the Hindustan Times in New Delhi with my picture in it. This was not what I was expecting, not what I was expecting at all. Along with all this stuff, there was something else going on in my state. We had a lieutenant governor who decided that in spite of the fact that transgender people had been going to the bathroom since the dawn of time, and I had been going to the women's room all over Dallas-Fort Worth for about 10 years, he decided that, no, I needed to go to the men's room and that trans men needed to go to the women's room, and he put forth a bill in the state of Texas. That didn't go over very well with the LGBTQ community, and I was contacted by a senator in the Texas state legislation, asked me if I would testify. I said, of course I would. I showed up in Austin for the testimony. You see here me, the 3 men around me are all trans men. We all pleaded with the Texas Senate to not pass this bill. They passed it. The House didn't. It did not make it through. So the lieutenant governor did another unprecedented thing. He decided to hold a special session to try and ram it through again. Well, at this point, I had a taste for advocacy. So 800 transgender people later in Austin, every day, we got so loud at one point that the Senate closed up shop at 10 o'clock in the morning, went home, and snuck back in at midnight to hold their sessions so that they could get around us. They did that one night. We were there every day, protests, marches. Austin, Texas looked like somebody had exploded a transgender bomb. They did not pass the legislation. With that, I decided that I needed to work on my advocacy. So since then, I have come to places like this and spoken to y'all. I've been to foreign countries and spoken to their governments. And the whole point is just to know that I'm really no different than anybody here. We all are different, but we're all different in wonderful ways. And there are people that you know that are trans. There are so many transgender people that we're not even counted. They're afraid to count us. When I came out, they said we were 0.003% of the population. About 6 months later, they revised that to 0.006 from 3. Last summer, there was a survey done in California of high school students, 6%. And those are just the ones that were asked and the ones who would actually admit to it. We are everywhere, and we finally have a voice. We finally have a situation where we can come out and be proud of who we are and show our faces. And one of the things that I like best about it is that I can stand up here as a person with a family, with daughters, a son-in-law, and I now have a grandbaby. So, from what started off as a really rocky childhood and a lot of lack of information, no information about transgender people at all, I now get to live the life I always wanted to live, and I do it with a loving woman. So, thank you for hearing me. And
thank you, you're great.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the moderator of our next session, former ABC and CNN anchor and correspondent, Jean Meserve.
So we're going to continue this conversation about being transgender, and we're going to broaden it a little bit to look at it through a family lens. I would love it if you would welcome to the stage Canadian actress, comedian, and mother, Debra McGrath, and her daughter. Her daughter is actress and musician Colin Mochrie. Come on up. Thank you both for sharing with all of us the story of what you've been through, this journey, which I'm sure has had some difficult and rocky moments, but hopefully a very happy conclusion. Kenley, we just heard from Jess a lot about the journey he took to discover that he was transgender. Right. Tell us a little about yours.
Okay, well, first I'd like to make the official statement that every transgender person with a public platform needs to make, which is that all our stories are different. All our histories are different. The way we figure things out is different. So I'm very happy to speak about my experience, but just know that there's a multitude of experiences. I think that's very important for everyone in this room to remember. And with that, I knew something was off. It wasn't, I wasn't, there's a common narrative of, insistence in childhood, like little boys being like, I'm a girl, like knowing this even if they don't communicate it. I didn't really have that. I just didn't feel like something was right. And especially around puberty, I felt I didn't really belong anywhere. Like I didn't belong with boys, I didn't belong with girls. Even though I desperately wanted to be part of girls' lives and their social circles and their friendships. And it wasn't until I had come out when I was 21 as bisexual. And I started becoming immersed in Toronto queer communities. And it was there that I started seeing transgender people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, which was something that I hadn't really seen, or at least like knowingly seen or understood correctly up to this point. And so it was then that I thought, I think it's time to ask a couple questions, because I definitely don't feel super attached to what I've been doing the past 20-something years. And slowly but surely, it was a long process of uncovering, and I came to where I am today.
And we have some photographs that we can show
great.
that show you.
Oh, look at him. Wow.
How old were you roughly when that was taken, do you think?
24, that was in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at this point, you're coming to terms?
Yeah, well, this was, I wasn't out yet, but I was incorporating, not in this picture, although my ears are pierced there. I was incorporating. What?
I was just saying they could move on to the next picture.
Oh.
Maybe we see it a little more clearly.
Yeah.
There you see.
Yeah, so I was incorporating some traditionally like feminine fashions into I don't know exactly how that conversation went with you, but I just said, yeah, I like it, and I'm gonna start incorporating it, and that was that really. So that was probably also, I was like 24, maybe 25.
And the next one? Aw. You're having fun there.
Yeah, that was I think after I was out. It must have been. It had to have been.
I think so.
Early on, but yeah. I don't know
think
what happened to that flower crown. Oh, yeah. That's a good one. And that would have been, I don't know, probably like a year ago or so.
So, Deborah, as a mom,
Yes.
did you have an inkling of what was going on here?
No.
Early on?
About that she was trans?
Well, even the discomfort period when Kinley was saying, I'm not sure where I fit.
Because
did you
she
perceive
was
that?
always a happy person, kind and sweet. Did not give us any problem during the teenage years. A couple of times eyeballs were on the ceiling, but that's not bad compared to what you get with teenagers. She was always feminine. We are from Canada, so we had a boy, and we went, oh boy, hockey. We have a video of her on skates with a helmet, with the feet like this, frozen, with her eyes darting back and forth. And so my husband said, yeah, not hockey. So we said to her, what do you want to do? She wanted to dance. And she was a dancer, a lovely dancer, great singer, piano player, drummer, fabulous drummer. That was her world. But I also understood, especially being an actor, you don't have to be gay to lean in directions of what you're interested in. We just thought, well, those are her interests. So it didn't really occur to us, except when we told my mother, who was 90 at the time, and my mother said, oh, transgender, what does that mean? I said, well, she's a girl, Mom. And she said, oh, I'm surprised, which I wasn't surprised to hear her say that. I said, why? And she said, I thought she was gay. And I said to her, why? And she said, because she's so loving and attentive to me, so gentle, so helpful, always focuses on me, that I thought, and my mom said, I realize I'm stereotyping. And I said, well, she's a girl. Well, that works too, said my mom.
Good for your mom. So, Kenley, how did you tell your parents that you were trans?
How did I?
Yeah.
It was over the phone, and it wasn't both of them, it was my mom, because my dad was out of town at the time.
And
As he is today, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I must say, it was my fault that she said it over the phone, because she said, when's Dad coming home? I said, in a couple days, because I need to talk to you guys. Well, for those of you that are mothers, you know that I go, no.
Wasn't a good
What do you need to
setup.
talk to us about? I'll talk to you when Dad gets home. Oh, no, you won't.
Well,
You'll talk to me right now.
Because there was a time before when I had said that, And you're like, okay. And I'm like, everything's okay. And then it was, I think, a couple days later that we were talking again. And you're like, no, like, I'll wait to talk to you. And you're like, no, we can't do this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just over the phone. And then I actually didn't tell my dad. My mom, I guess you called him?
You think?
Yeah, so that's how it happened.
And what was her reaction? How did you react?
She told me what her name was at the time, which was Hannah, and she wants she, her pronouns. And I said, okay, is everything okay? Are you fine? Are you happy? Yes. Okay, well, we'll talk when Dad gets home. And then I really had to, after I spoke to my husband, I had to sit with it. And again, I will preface this by saying, I don't speak for all parents of transgender or any parents of LGBTQ plus kids. I honestly didn't have a problem with it. I didn't. As I said in a piece I wrote, I wasn't invested in her gender. I was invested in her humanity. And as I also said, I instantly knew that her Christmas stocking was going to be way easier to fill. True story. But I did that night have a horrendous night of nightmares, terrible nightmares, that my son was dead because I had not physically seen her. So my only issue was for her safety. I was glad we were in Toronto because I figured it was a place to be if you were going to be all different things.
And safety is something I'd love to explore because the FBI in the US just put out statistics this week that violence against non-gender conforming people was up 41% last year.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And Kenley, I'm just wondering if in your life you feel threatened or have felt threatened. Have there been incidents?
Yes. Yeah, I've been fortunate that no serious altercations have occurred. But yeah, even things as innocuous as the way someone looks at you in public, it can be alarming. I've definitely been approached in less than classy ways. I remember walking home from a friend's place, turning the corner, some guy on a bike was coming around, pulled over 6 feet away from me and asked, "Do you have a pussy?" And yeah, that stuff's scary. So I'm lucky that I'm surrounded with a lot of people in my immediate life that are completely supportive, and I know I have them to go to. And for me, this isn't the case for every transgender person, but for me, I'm lucky that the negative experiences are few and far between. But yeah, sure, it happens. I know the reality of of our world.
Have you ever in public tried to shift your appearance in order to take attention away from yourself? Have you ever done that?
Shift her appearance to a masculine?
Yeah, I'm thinking putting up a hood or something like that to minimize reaction.
When I first came out, I was still in between. I'd sort of go back and forth in presentation, but that wasn't as much for my safety as much as, for one thing, I had the clothes. So I just was okay. And let's be honest, boy clothes are way easier to wear than girl clothes. They're so much more comfortable.
And they have pockets.
And they have, I have so many clothes with pockets now. These ones don't. Whatever. Okay. So there was never a point. No, I never consciously wore. Did I? No, I don't think I ever wore anything to detract attention away from myself. I was so relieved to be able to start presenting the way I wanted to. So I wanted to do it.
So I should explain that Deborah's husband, Kinley's dad, is Colin Mochrie, who is known in the United States. Certainly, I believe it probably aired in Canada too. For Whose Line Is It Anyway? Very, very funny man, and
He's
a
okay.
very public career, as is yours. And there was some online hate.
Yeah.
Deborah, tell us what happened, and tell us how Colin reacted to that.
Well, he's pretty Twittery. He's out there on the Twitter, losing fans daily. And he said one day, you know, my 86-year-old mother and my 90-year-old mother-in-law accepted our daughter instantly. I'm misquoting him, I'm sorry. It was something like, why is it that others can't, who are not even involved with our family? And so instantly it went viral, and then he's on ET and all Entertainment Tonight and all these different shows with Kinley, and a couple of them with me, talking about it. And the backlash was minimal. As he said, it was 3-tiered. The largest tier, I'm happy to say, throughout North America, I'd say 85% positive. Thank you for standing up for your child. Love is love, all that kind of thing. Then a percentage of it was, we're going to fix this, come to a conversion camp, take these pills, find the Lord, all that
I'm
arena.
starting in a month.
Pardon me?
No, it's a bad joke.
And then there was a small part of it that I don't really know, because he wouldn't let me see it, and he was right not to, because then I'd have the 3 a.m. paces, which was quite helpful, quite hateful, and actually threatening.
And he responded, didn't he?
He responded to everything with love and saying, how does this affect your life? And it comes down to so many people like that decide they don't like it and they're going to stop it, as opposed to, yes, but how does it affect your life? Well, it's just that but how does it affect your life? Well, it's just that and then you realize there are certain people who simply want things the way they want them and don't accept. I go to church, so I got to say that here. It is the United Church of Canada, which means we barely got our toe in the door. But we always say we're the egg salad faith. But I have to say, I do get upset when people use God, because if God created us all, God created us all.
We do have a couple of pictures of the family, which maybe we can put up as we talk. Kenley, do you also have faith? I'm just curious, since your mother has said that
goodness.
she goes to church.
Oh boy, no, not really. I don't stick to a late. I would say,
man, this is fantastic to watch.
No, it's fine. I swear. I'm agnostic. I don't necessarily. I've fluctuated throughout my life. I've really gone through a lot of different questions about God or some sort of higher power. At this point, I don't believe there is, but I also can't say definitely that there isn't, because we don't know, and there are probably things that are beyond human conception or perception, so I'm not going to say it definitely doesn't exist. That's what I think.
Okay. We have a picture here. Here is Grandma, right?
This was so recent. This was a couple weeks ago.
This was Halloween night.
Yeah.
Deborah, is this your mom?
It is, and I have to say, I hope you ladies appreciate that I allowed this picture. I have no makeup on. I'm just saying.
I don't either.
Oh, but please. There's a bit of a difference. And that's my almost 93-year-old mother.
Who obviously clearly accepting. I like the little chapeau you have on here too.
They're good, aren't they?
We have one more slide, and this interests me because it's a PFLAG photograph of the family. Yeah. So you've become advocates?
Yeah, we have become advocates, and I won't say I counsel trans parents. People reach out to me to come speak to them. They are parents that are struggling. Sometimes they get frustrated because I can't honestly say that I struggled, except, as I said, for her safety. But we talk about things. I listen to them and I ask questions. I'm joining PFLAG. I'm a member of ACTRA Council, which is the actors union. You have SAG-AFTRA in the States. I'm on the council, and I'm also the only straight cis member of the LGBTQ+ committee, and we do great work to spread the word too. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm curious about the professional implications.
Pardon me?
Have there been any professional repercussions for either one of you? You're in a creative profession, both of you, which I stereotypically probably think is a little bit more accepting of non-gender conforming individuals. But has there been any effect, positive or negative, for either one of you or for Colin?
For me, no, and for Colin, no. He loses more fans for his Trump tweets than his pride tweets. But I have to say, on the contrary, we are in airports, we're on the street, and parents, trans people, gay people come up to us weeping with gratitude. Because every time someone who is known comes out, you spread the word. You spread the word and someone goes, well, wait a minute, I like him. So how can this be? So no, and certainly it wouldn't be here. It just wouldn't be. It wouldn't affect you. Kinley's an actor.
Didn't for me either. No, it didn't. I just had to get new headshots done. That was about it. But no, there weren't any implications at all. And like I'm a server, and I was a server at that point too. And coming out of my work went beautifully.
She serves at the Second City here, and great support from staff and.
Jess talked earlier about growing up in a world where there was no word even to describe who she felt she was, much less a community of people who would understand, much less books. There are now even children's books about being transgender. Do you think you've had a much easier journey in some ways than Jess has?
Well, I mean, yes. I also didn't really have good ideas about who transgender people were when I was growing up. And again, like it wasn't really until being immersed in queer communities that I really had that proper understanding. But I remember growing up, they were very like transgender people. They were very like fringe people, and like something. I used to think like that something like horrible must have happened to them to have turned out the way they did. And it's not like I thought like they were like bad or like wrong people, but I just thought like that like there was no connection for me, because I was just like, well, this is someone who's like gone through like trauma or something, or like someone who's just had like a bad life and something happened. Like it was just really awful ideas about like who we were. And so there was, and I mean, the reason why I wasn't able to sort of latch on to this concrete sense of identity when I was growing up is because like there wasn't really education then either. I think it was more known, but it was still like a sensational thing. People who showed up on like whatever Jerry Springer or Maury was it. So there just wasn't a lot of great information, and it wasn't until I started doing my own research again when I actually started seeing the people show up in my life.
The positive view.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Deborah, how about for you? Also, there's a lot of information out there now for
yes.
parents and
and it was helpful for us. We needed to, the misgendering, I'm telling you, before she would come over to the house, she, her, she, her, she, her. It was tough. You've called someone him, he for 25 years. She always very politely and gently corrected us, but there were a few times that we apologized and said, we are trying. You've got to give us the intention. I didn't know. I mean, I was starting to know more about transgender, but there was so much I didn't know, and I didn't know how many people were. And the interesting thing is when she came out, everyone of her generation was saying, congratulations. And my generation was saying, how are you?
And you're fine.
I am crazy fine. And I will say this, you'll think I'm a liar. You're wrong, I'm not a liar. I wouldn't have missed this experience for the world, because it has taught me about all aspects of life that we are prejudiced about, and all creatures of the earth, and how people are just struggling to be who they want to be. They're not invading your space. They're not invading my space. They're just trying to live authentic lives everywhere. And I hope that this millennial generation, who's super mad at our generation right now, will change that. I don't know one millennial who doesn't know at least 5 trans people. And I think that's a great sign for the future of living and let living.
And Kinley, I have to imagine that you're a happier person.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, yeah. You know, I think someone put it best. So I saw an old partner of mine, like the end of last year. We hadn't seen each other for a while, and we were working on the same street, but we hadn't gotten together like the entire time. So we finally had dinner together and like caught up. And this was, you know, we had dated before I had even come out. And so we were catching up, and I said, listen, if you have any questions for me, like, please, like, go ahead. And she did. And so she asked me a lot of different questions. And I said, I hope it's okay. I've been happy to answer your questions. I have a couple questions for you. And I said, do you like notice, I mean, obviously there's a difference in the way like I look and I present, but do you notice like any sort of difference about me just like generally as a person? And she said, well, no, in a sense, no, because you do seem like the same person to me, but I feel like I'm not talking to you through a filter. And I think that was I think that was a really like good way of putting it. I sort of, through transition, even surprised myself, like the way I move is different, the way I inflect is different, all sorts of ways in which I realized, even though it wasn't really intentional, I was holding back a lot of the ways like I express myself even physically. So I think that is why I'd say, yeah, it's just like the filter's gone. I just get to be me now.
So your mom very eloquently, I think, left us with a parting message about what she'd like this audience to know about transgender people. Do you have a closing thought, something you'd like them to understand that perhaps they don't?
I would say, I mean, I would reiterate what I said at the beginning, which is that don't take my word and my experience as gospel. There are so many different ways of being transgender, so many paths people take to transition or not transition. I think just we're we're here to stay, and no, really, like we're here to stay, and. There are so many people just trying to like will us out of experience, and it's just like it's not going to happen. We've been here for as long as time, and we're beautiful, multifaceted, wonderful folks, and hope you take the time to get to know us in each of our stories, because we're pretty cool.
I would like to thank Deborah, and especially you, Kenley, for coming and sharing this very personal story and experience. We wish you both all
Thank you
so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And ladies, your breakout sessions are coming up at noon after a quick coffee break. Enjoy the afternoon.